We are now 63 days into the Gulf oil disaster. No change in this now familiar site of the gushing underwater well. And we are only now finding out about an internal BP document predicting that in a worst-case scenario, as much as 100,000 barrels could be pouring out of this thing a day. That is way higher, of course, than the government's 60,000 barrel a day estimate.
New warning today about how a just discovered plume of oil under the surface could wreak havoc on the food chain?
You're exactly right. Researchers have discovered a new 22-mile wide plume of oil creeping closer to an underwater canyon off the Florida Panhandle. That canyon sends nutrient-rich water from the deep sea up to shallower water. So if that oil seeps into the canyon, it could create what's known as kind of a toxic soup for marine life and vegetation, John. That would not be good.
Doesn't sound like it. Chris Gutierrez in Louisiana, thank you. New details tonight about the chaotic first moments after the BP rig exploded in the Gulf, killing 11 workers and sparking the worst oil spill in our nation's history. According to an investigation by our corporate cousin, the Wall Street Journal, crews were unprepared for that kind of emergency and overwhelmed when it happened. One worker reportedly says nobody was in charge as debris fell and the flames erupted. Other reports of breakdowns in the chain of command are out there and mayhem on the lifeboats. And listen to this. A 23-year-old worker noticed no one had alerted the Coast Guard to the explosion, so she grabbed the radio and called for help. We're told the captain commanding the Deepwater Horizon reprimanded her, saying she lacked authority to make that call, while at the time he and other managers were discussing what to do.
We're hopeful that we can just stop this leak, which is what we really need to do.
As we get fresh updates about the effort on the Gulf floor, new information reveals just how bad this disaster really is.
Oil has been spilling now for over a month in the Gulf.
Now, updated numbers show just how much and what lies beneath. Tonight, the frightening details of what scientists say they've just discovered right under the water's surface. There's encouraging news and there's very bad news from the disaster in the Gulf of Mexico. First, BP Oil Company reports it's now getting set to pump more heavy mud down into the blown-out well to try to seal it shut for good. That hasn't happened yet, apparently, but so far the process is reported to be going according to plan. And while BP has now officially suspended the pumping, the company's chief operating officer says it's not because anything's wrong.
Over the last 16 hours or so, we've been assessing the first results from the first portion of our top kill efforts. We restocked the vessels that were offshore, and we've developed the next phase of the top kill operation. And
Doug Suttle says he expects BP will resume pumping tonight. This is an aerial look at the site where teams have been trying to kill that well. Of course, even if crews are completely successful, even if not one more drop of oil leaks into the Gulf of Mexico, this spill has already done incalculable damage. That's the bad news. And now we have the proof. The United States Geological Survey released new calculations today of just how much oil is actually flowing out of that well. The scientists say their best estimates are now between 12 and 19,000 barrels per day. Although one experiment found it could be as much as 25,000 barrels a day. So that means, in a very best case scenario, more than 18 million gallons of oil have already spilled into the Gulf. That's nearly twice as much as in the Exxon Valdez disaster. In the worst case, closer to 39 million gallons. That would equal nearly 4 Exxon Valdez disasters. So where is it all? Well, a fraction is right there on the surface, but today scientists announced they've now discovered a massive new underwater plume. Listen to this. It's 22 miles long, 6 miles wide, and more than a half mile in depth. And right now, the scientists say it's headed inland, headed right for Mobile Bay in South Alabama. The scientists say they're going to test that plume to see if it's something that resulted from teams using chemical dispersants in an effort to break up the oil. As if the oil disaster isn't already enough, federal forecasters now warn the Gulf Coast could now be in for one of the most active hurricane seasons on record. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration predicts that somewhere between 14 and 23 named storms will occur this year. Of those, it predicts up to 14 could become hurricanes, with 3 to 7 of them becoming major hurricanes, meaning Category 3 or above, producing winds of more than 110 miles per hour. Last year, there were but 3 hurricanes in total. And if a storm does come ashore, bringing oil with it, the oil would, in theory, be spread everywhere, blowing onto homes and cars and people and animals and everything, leaving an oily, smelly, and with the dispersants, toxic mess. Rick Reichmuth, our chief meteorologist, is with us. If the predictions hold true, the folks along the Atlantic and the Gulf Coast are in for one hell of a summer and fall.
They certainly are. I tell you what, I'm scared hearing these kinds of predictions and these numbers. I have not, in my time doing in this business, seen them...
50 years.
Yeah, exactly. Watch it. Seeing them predict that many storms this early in the season. Sometimes they'll go back and change it once you start seeing things really become active. But to start out with these kinds of numbers are very scary. And I tell you what, ocean temperatures are extremely warm. In some cases, around 4 degrees above where you typically should be for this time of year. And we have an El Nino, which is what made last season so minimal. That's gone, and we are going to see extreme activity across this area.
June 1st, so Tuesday of next week, the storm, the day after Memorial Day, it officially begins, and the question is, should a tropical storm pass through? You wonder what it would do to the effort to contain this oil.
Well, there's two answers to this. The immediate effort to contain the oil, it causes major problems. So obviously, you can't be out there on ships doing anything to contain it, and if you have the oil in one spot, it's easier for man-made containment. The flip side of that, Shepard, is in the long term, wind actually causes the oil to evaporate, and that's why it could cause some problems bringing it in with some of these storms, and turning of these waves will break up the storm. It's a natural dispersant versus these chemical dispersants that we've been seeing them put out right now. So in the long term, 50, 100 years, the weather will be the thing that will help save the Gulf area. In the short term, it's going to cause major problems.
Rick Reichmuth, thank you.
New York, this is NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams.
Good evening. It is now the biggest oil spill in U.S. history. Somewhere between 18 and 39 million gallons of crude oil. In other words, take those earlier flow estimates and double them. This is what it looks like. It's still billowing into the water tonight. That so-called top kill operation was halted for a while, reloaded, and resumes tonight. No results yet. This is what it looks like from above, an arresting sight for the amount of the Gulf that this covers. And today, a second plume in another location was discovered. We heard from the president today. He spoke to the growing anger, and he said he will take responsibility for fixing what has happened.
Far beneath the polluted surface, University of South Florida scientists found a new plume of oil, 22 miles long and 6 miles wide, stretching northeast from the wellhead. Researchers fear such plumes are caused by the dispersant, forcing the oil underwater.
But even if Top Kill works, the problem won't end. The ongoing challenge will be to protect unaffected coastline like this from the oil that's already in the water.
Tonight, there are continued concerns that the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico could spread even further than first thought, as BP now works on a permanent solution to stop that leak. In fact, the company now plans to plug the oil well that so far has leaked at least 5 million gallons in the Gulf so far.
Right now, engineers say they're capturing about 20% of the crude oil. The rest of it still flowing into the Gulf, and experts say it is making the environmental disaster worse. Computer models show the oil could be caught in a loop current, which could carry it through the Florida Keys and then all the way up the eastern seaboard.
It's rising up from the sea floor, and it's reaching some level where it spreads out, and then the prevailing currents just drift it along.
Once it is in the loop current, scientists say it will take about a week before oil begins to show up in the Florida Keys.